I bet some of you didn't see this coming. I've made it clear before as to why I hate talking about Greek mythology on my channel, and that's mainly due to the oversaturation of pseudo-intellectuals on this platform who parrot the same tired old tales over and over again. Meanwhile, they talk in a slow, monotone voice like this through a microphone they fished out of a Goodwill bargain bin. Sorry, but there's only so many times I can stomach to hear another telling of the War of the Titans, Prometheus bringing fire to the world, Hades kidnapping Persephone, etc., etc. So, in an effort to revitalize both mine and the interest of my subscribers into this incredibly overrated mythology, I've hand-selected some often overlooked stories from Greek mythology which appeal to my fucked up sense of humor, which you never hear these fossils talking about. Anyone remember the time Apollo's son invented racism? Or how about the time the king of Thrace went full toy box killer? Or how a group of rowdy sailors tried to rape a sexually ambiguous twink only to find out he's actually a god? If none of those sound familiar to you, you've been done a disservice by whoever introduced you to Greek mythology. So let's rectify that. Here are the top 3 tales from ancient Greece they, as ambiguous as that sounds/is, don't want you to know. Number 3. Toddler organs. The last thing you'd want in your Burger King burger is some toddler's colon. But as it turns out, that may be what you get. King Yeah, I can't talk in a text-to-speech voice like that the entire video. Our story begins with King Tereus and Queen Procne of Thrace, who had a son named Itys, who had just recently turned 5 years old. And as was customary for any child who was excluded from the massive infant mortality rate of the day, Itys' parents decided to hold a party for the young lad, inviting all the people who pretended to be his friends and estranged family members who were only going to be there because they heard they were serving alcohol. One such drunk aunt was Procne's sister Philomela, who didn't have a boating license, so it fell on poor King Tereus to pick her up from Athens. However, upon seeing his wife's younger sister again, Tereus was reminded of how hot she was, and so kidnapped her, took her to his private hunting lodge, and raped her. As you do. Philomela was justifiably angry with her brother-in-law and threatened to tell her story to her sister in Thrace and the king of Athens, who was her father, by the way, and even the gods themselves. Which, okay, Philomela, why would you tell him this? He is literally right there.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
You fucking idiot. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, Tereus was pretty horny and so decided just to cut off Philomela's tongue rather than her head so that she wouldn't be able to tell her story to anyone. And then raped her again. Like, repeatedly. Until he got tired of her and handed her off to King Lynceus as a concubine before returning home and telling Procne that her sister had caught the coof and died on her way back home. Meanwhile, Philomela busied herself at the palace of Lynceus, weaving a tapestry telling the story of her abduction and rape, and presented it to Queen Lethusa, who just so happened to be friends with Procne, and so sent the concubine back to Thrace, where the queen recognized her sister, realized that her husband lied about her dying, and decided that the best way to get back at him was to cut up their 5-year-old son and serve him to his father in a stew. Rape, mutilation, infanticide, cannibalism? This story's got everything! Why are we not hiring drag queens on the local sex offenders registry to read out this tale to all the young, impressionable, soft-headed children at the library? The sad part is only half of that was a joke. So naturally, after Tereus finishes his meal, Philomela walks into the room bearing the only part of little Itys that they didn't cook and serve to him, that being the child's severed head. After puking up his chewed up son, King Tereus went after the two women, chasing them outside the palace with his sword, intent on impaling both women upon it. However, the gods, having a front row seat to this shit show, decided enough was enough, and transformed the threesome into different species of birds. For some reason. Tereus had his sword fused with his face and became the hoopoe. Procne became the swallow, with her red accents meant to be symbolic of Itys' blood, and Philomela became the nightingale, a species of bird who is normally silent except during the spring when they chirp what sounds like "Teru, Teru," accusing the king of his misdeeds, even though, ironically enough, this is the nightingale's mating call. Jesus Christ, they fucked that one up. Number 2. The last thing you'd want in your sun chariot is an angsty teenager with a micro penis. But as it turns out, that may be what you get.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man? Bro, I'm out, man. That nigga's tripping.
So, Apollo has got a bit of a reputation in Greek mythology as possibly the most sexually experimental of the gods, alternating between the female figure and the charms of the teenage twink every day of the week ending in a Y. Wonder where he gets it from. This debauchery, however, does not go without consequences, as Apollo sired several illegitimate children, one of whom was named Phaethon, which means shining one in Greek. Phaethon grew up never knowing his father, but his mother, Clymene, insisted that she was going to get her child support check enough times within earshot that he ascertained for himself that he was the son of a god. Naturally, like any social outcast teenage boy, Phaethon went around town, bragging about how he was a literal demigod, and that made him much cooler than the other kids at school. However, there was one small problem. Nobody believed his bullshit. Instead, they all pointed and laughed at Phaethon for trying to fit in by telling such a ridiculous story. This went on for quite some time. All the while, the mockery of his peers triggered Phaethon's teenage angst until he decided he had had just about as much as he could take and took matters into his own hands. You might think that joke was fucked up, but technically it's way tamer than what actually happens next. So, Phaethon comes home from school one day and confronts his mother, asking for some sort of proof to back up her claims that he really was the spawn of a god. To which she replied in an alcoholic stupor that if he wanted proof he should just haul ass to the ends of the earth to Apollo's temple where he can confront his father for himself. And that's just what he did. Upon arriving at the sun god's temple, Apollo took one look at the boy and said, "Ah, shit. That's mine, isn't it?" Apollo then swears to grant any wish Phaethon wants in order to keep him from squealing to the OCSE. Like most adolescents his age, Phaethon wanted to borrow the car, both as proof that he was Apollo's child, but also as a status symbol because in this legend, Apollo drives the literal fucking sun. Apollo, realizing that even Zeus himself couldn't get the horses of the sun chariot to behave themselves, much less a scrawny teenage boy who probably idolizes fictitious anime characters. And so, as an alternative, he offered all the riches in the world, which actually belonged to his uncle Hades, and thus were not his to barter with. Though Phaethon thought he was too cool for the free market economy and the equivalent exchange of goods, and insisted that he be allowed to drive the chariot for a day, just so that he could flip off all of his classmates from the surface of the sun. Which, now that I think about it, is actually pretty cool. Unlike when he inevitably loses control of the horses, causing him to fly way too close to the surface of the earth and setting everything on fire. This single mistake is responsible for several natural phenomena, according to the Greeks, such as the oceans boiling, the destruction of several cities, the desertification of Africa south of the Mediterranean, and I shit you not, the darkening of the skin of the Ethiopians. Which is just... yeah, this is why Susan hates us. Eventually, every living thing on the planet cried out to Zeus to stop the calamity. However, he couldn't fuck the fire, so he decided to do the job half-assed, as per usual, and just blow up the sun chariot with one of his thunderbolts. Then did fuck all about the raging fires, which were actually scorching the entire earth. Though to be fair, he probably had a 12-year-old boy over and couldn't be bothered. Anyway, having been shot down in a literal champagne supernova, Phaethon plummeted down to Earth like a comet, where his body crashed into the Eridanus River, where his charred body was fished out by the nymphs of Italy, who marked his tomb with the epitaph, "Here Phaethon lies, who in the sun god's chariot fared, and though he greatly failed, more greatly he dared." Which is really just a polite way of saying that he died as he lived. a dumbass. Oh, and also his sister's transformed into trees or some shit. I don't know, somebody should get the baking soda though. Number 1. The last thing you'd want to stick your dick into is a vengeful god of wine who will turn you and all of your friends into marine animals. But that may be what you get. Oh, fucking hell. While on their way to Delos, a group of pirates ran out of fresh drinking water, and so were forced to stop at the island of Chios. They decided to split up and reconvene once they had found some source of water. The captain was the first to find a spring, and so called for all of his seafaring men to help him gather the water on board. However, one of the sailors found something far more interesting. A gender-ambiguous, hairless twink who was just passed out in the middle of the field and smelled like my dad on any given week. That is to say, drunk off his ass. They got him to mumble a few words and were able to determine that he was a young boy, which got the crew very excited, seeing as this is ancient Greece and the whole fucking nation is basically one big Epstein's Island. However, the captain knew what was up as soon as he looked at him and determined that this young boy was far too beautiful to be a mortal, and warned the crew not to take him aboard. To which they punted him in the gut and tied up the boy, intent on taking him back to the mainland and selling him into slavery. I'll give you 3 guesses as to what kind of slavery, and the first 2 don't count. Anyway, they get on board, and while sailing to their destination, the young boy starts to wake up and transforms into a grown-ass man before their very eyes. The ship stops dead in the water, the wind ceasing to blow, and the sailors' oars become tangled up in grapevines. It's almost like they shouldn't have brought the beautiful twink who might be a god on board, which the captain specifically warned them not to bring on board because he might be a god. The mysterious man on board then rises to his feet, seemingly summoning a horde of lions, tigers, and panthers out of nowhere, which spooks the sailors and they try to flee by jumping over the side of the ship into the waters below, only to be horrifically transmuted into dolphins. The man then reveals himself to the captain of the ship as the god of wine Dionysus, and decides to spare his life, presumably because he wasn't being a creepy, rapey old sailor who goes on to pass along his story as a cautionary tale to never pick up hitchhikers. Or try to sell them into slavery. Actually, just avoid Greece in general. Lord knows I specialize in doing that on my channel. Thank you to everyone for watching today's video. Hopefully I found some tales you had never heard of before from this incredibly oversaturated mythology. If you have any suggestions for a possible part 2, or just an entirely different video in general, leave it in the comment section down below and I might just get around to it eventually. If you liked what you saw here and want to hear more tales from Greek mythology, fuck off and go sub to another channel. However, if you like my style of narration and want to check out my other catalog of videos, consider subscribing, as I can assure you, there is probably something of interest you can find on my channel. If not, repeat step number 1. Thanks to my patrons, Duke of Petchington, Pyrotic Napalm, and Kitch Fairman. If you guys would like to help out the channel, link to my Patreon is pasted down below, as well as the link to the Messiahs and Mythology Discord. Until next time, I appreciate each and every one of you, and have a God's blessed day. However, he couldn't fuck the fire, so he decided to do the job half-assed, as per usual, and just blew up... Seriously? Seriously? Hey, nobody's gonna fuck you! Your penis is really fucking small! You're just gonna pull down your pants and then she's gonna laugh at it. Trust me, I've been there.